What happens when you discover your wife's secret affair with a criminal mastermind, and how far would you go to get revenge? This is the chilling story of betrayal, a dangerous lover, and a desperate fight for survival. You won't believe what happens next, the moment I saved her life, but at what cost? Stick around till the end, because the truth will shock you. Let's dive into the dark side of love, crime, and vengeance. Chapter 1. The Perfect Shell. My name is Jack Reeves, and I had the life many people dreamed of. A successful lawyer with a thriving career, a beautiful wife, Amanda, and a home in one of Chicago's most affluent suburbs. To anyone who looked at us from the outside, we were perfect. Amanda was everything I ever wanted. Beautiful, intelligent, compassionate. I thought I knew her better than anyone else. She was my rock. But the longer I stayed in the marriage, the more something started to feel off. It wasn't obvious at first. It was the little things, like her distant demeanor when we'd have dinner together, the long hours at the office that I never questioned before. But slowly, I began to notice the cracks. There was an unease in the air whenever we were alone. Her phone always face down, her passwords changing more frequently. I tried to dismiss it as paranoia, the pressures of my demanding job seeping into my personal life, but then came the night I couldn't ignore it any longer. I was home late from a meeting, and as I walked through the front door, I noticed something strange. Amanda's phone was charging on the kitchen counter, and I could see it flashing with a notification. It wasn't like her to leave it unattended, especially when she was so protective of it. I approached cautiously and saw the name on the screen, Liam. I didn't know who Liam was at first, but something inside me twisted. I tried to stay calm, but my heart was pounding. I picked up the phone and, without hesitation, opened the message. It wasn't just a friendly exchange, it was intimate, the kind of intimacy that left no room for doubt. Can't wait to see you tonight. You're all I think about. My mind raced. I stood frozen in place. Amanda's affair wasn't just a possibility anymore, it was real. She was having an affair. My wife, the woman I had built a life with, was betraying me with someone else. But who was Liam? Why hadn't I noticed the signs before? I didn't know how to process what I was feeling. I should have confronted her right then and there, but the betrayal stung too deeply. I couldn't bear to face her, not yet. Instead, I slipped out of the house, walked down the street, and sat in my car for hours. The world outside felt like it was spinning, and yet, there I was, caught in the eye of a storm I never saw coming. When I finally returned home, Amanda was asleep. I couldn't bring myself to wake her up, to confront her in that vulnerable moment. I needed answers, and I needed them badly. That night, I called a private investigator. It was a step I didn't want to take, but I had to know the truth. I had to understand what I was dealing with before I made a decision. Chapter 2. Cracks in the Facade. The next few days felt like I was living in a fog. I couldn't escape the images in my head, the messages, the way Amanda had looked at me like she was a stranger. I went through the motions, work, dinner, pretending everything was fine, but deep down, I knew it was over. Nothing felt right anymore. The private investigator came through faster than I expected. He had tracked Amanda's movements, pieced together fragments of her day-to-day life, and within hours, he gave me a name, Liam Harper. A businessman, known for his charm, his wealth, and his connections. But there was something else beneath the surface. Liam wasn't just any businessman. He had a reputation, a dangerous one. According to the investigator, Liam had a long history of shady dealings, the kind that made people disappear. His name was linked to several criminal activities, though nothing was ever directly pinned on him. He ran an underground operation, mixing legitimate business with illegal activities, drugs, arms deals, money laundering. He had connections all over the city, and the deeper I dug, the more I realized just how much trouble I was in. Amanda wasn't just sleeping with a businessman. She was involved with someone who played a dangerous game, and she didn't even see it. I confronted Amanda the next morning. She was in the kitchen, making coffee, the same routine we had for years. I stood in the doorway, watching her move, trying to suppress the boiling rage inside me. When she noticed me, she smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. She knew I knew. I didn't even need to say a word. "Jack," she said, her voice soft, almost apologetic. You're not supposed to know. I cut her off. "Who is he, Amanda? Who is Liam?" Her face went pale. For the first time in a long time, I saw fear in her eyes. I didn't mean for this to happen. I never wanted to hurt you. But I didn't care about the excuses anymore. I didn't care about her words, about her tears. I needed answers, and I needed to hear the truth from her, the one thing I hadn't gotten yet. He's he's someone I don't know what to say, Jack. It's not just physical. He's been there for me when you haven't been. I You've been with him, Amanda. I felt sick saying it. The words tasted like poison, but I had to hear her admit it. You've been sleeping with him. She nodded, tears welling in her eyes. I'm so sorry, Jack. I I thought I was making things better. You were so distant. You didn't see me. I needed someone who saw me. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to make her understand the damage she had done. But I didn't. I just stood there, feeling the walls of my world crumbling around me. And him? Does he see you, Amanda? Does he care? She looked away. I don't know. I don't know what I was doing anymore. I don't know who I am. Her words were hollow, as empty as the promises she'd made to me over the years. I couldn't stand it. I couldn't stand the person she had become, but the truth hit me harder than any blow. She had chosen him, and I was nothing more than a shadow of the man I used to be. The room felt suffocating. I didn't know how much longer I could stay in that house, in that moment, before everything spiraled out of control. I walked out the door, leaving her behind. But I wasn't walking away to heal. I wasn't walking away to forgive. No, I was walking away to prepare for the one thing I hadn't yet figured out. Revenge. Chapter 3. Unmasking the enemy. I spent the next few days in a haze, numb from the revelation but not willing to let it go. The world around me felt like it was moving in slow motion, and all I could focus on was Amanda and her betrayal. But my anger wasn't just aimed at her anymore. It was directed at Liam, the man who had taken everything from me, the man who thought he could control everything, and I was going to make sure he understood the price of that. I couldn't afford to be reckless. I wasn't some amateur looking for petty revenge. No, I was a lawyer, a strategist. I needed to understand who I was dealing with before I acted. I called in every favor I had, tapped into connections I had built over the years. Liam wasn't just any businessman. He was a player in a much darker game. Through my contacts, I learned more about him than I ever wanted to know. Liam Harper was a name whispered in the halls of Chicago's criminal underworld. He had ties to drug cartels, arms dealers, and illegal gambling rings. His fortune wasn't just made through legitimate businesses. It was built on the suffering of others. He was ruthless, cold, and always a step ahead. He'd been tied to several disappearances, but no one had ever been able to pin anything on him. He was a ghost slipping through the cracks of the law like water through a sieve. But Liam's connections weren't his only asset. It was his charm, his ability to manipulate, to make people think they owed him something, that made him dangerous. And Amanda? She wasn't the first woman to fall into his orbit. She wouldn't be the last. I couldn't let it slide. I knew if I wanted to hurt him, I'd have to hit him where it mattered most, this empire. I wasn't going to play his game. I was going to destroy it. But I needed leverage, and that's where my legal mind came into play. I began collecting evidence. It wasn't hard. Liam was reckless with his power, and the more I dug, the more skeletons I found in his closet. Offshore bank accounts, fraudulent business deals, and even whispers of blood on his hands. But none of it was enough to take him down. Not yet. It wasn't just about the money or the business anymore. It was about sending a message. I needed to make him feel the same fear I'd felt when I first discovered Amanda's betrayal. And I wasn't going to stop until I had him exactly where I wanted him. But the deeper I went, the more I realized I was playing a dangerous game. Liam wasn't just a criminal, he was a predator. And the closer I got to the truth, the more dangerous it became for me. He had eyes everywhere, and I wasn't the only one who wanted to bring him down. I knew I had to act fast. If I didn't, the situation could escalate beyond anything I could control. But I was ready. I had to be. Because this wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about survival. Chapter 4. The Truth Revealed. I was sitting in my office late one night when Amanda called. I hadn't heard from her in days. She left a message on my voicemail, her voice trembling with what I could only assume was fear or guilt. Jack, we need to talk. Please. I don't know what I was thinking. I'm so sorry. Can we meet? I need to explain. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to shut her out for good. But the other part, the part that still clung to the memory of the woman I had once loved, wanted to hear her out. So I agreed. We met at a quiet cafe on the outskirts of town. It wasn't far from where I'd spent hours pacing, staring into the night, plotting my next move. But this time, it felt different. I wasn't there to confront her or fight with her. I was there to get the answers I needed to move forward, answers that I was sure would break me completely. Amanda was already sitting at a table when I arrived. She looked fragile, her face pale and hollow, as if the weight of what she had done had finally begun to take its toll. She was staring at the coffee cup in front of her, her fingers nervously tracing the rim. When she saw me, she immediately stood up, her eyes filled with tears. Jack, I don't know how to say this. I know I've hurt you. I can't take it back, but I never meant for any of this to happen. I took a deep breath and sat down across from her, trying to keep my emotions in check. Then tell me why, Amanda. Why him? Why this? Her voice shook as she spoke. I don't know. I felt so alone, Jack. You were always working, always too busy for me. I tried to get your attention, tried to get you to see me. But you didn't, not really. Liam, he paid attention. He saw me. He made me feel like I mattered again. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell her how selfish she was, how her actions had torn apart everything we had built. But instead, I stayed silent, listening to her words, trying to understand her pain even though mine was too overwhelming to bear. I never wanted to hurt you, she continued. I thought maybe if I could just feel alive again, things would get better. But they didn't. I made the wrong choice, Jack, and I'm sorry. I let her finish, but inside, I was a storm. Every word that left her mouth felt like a dagger. She didn't just cheat on me, she'd chosen him over me, over everything we'd ever shared. She had broken something inside me, something I couldn't get back. But then, she said something that made my blood run cold. Liam, she hesitated, as though weighing whether to speak. Liam is dangerous, Jack. You don't understand. He's not just a businessman. He's involved in things. Things that could hurt you. Things I didn't know at first, but now I'm scared. He's not what you think. My heart stopped. The words hung in the air, thick with warning. What do you mean, Amanda? He has connections, people he's involved with. He's not just playing a game. He's in too deep, and I'm afraid he'll come after you, after us. I couldn't breathe. I'd suspected something was wrong, but hearing her admit it sent chills through my body. Liam wasn't just an affair. He was a threat. A dangerous man who didn't care about anyone but himself. And now, Amanda's betrayal wasn't just a matter of heartbreak. It was a matter of survival. I've made a terrible mistake, Jack, Amanda whispered, her eyes pleading for forgiveness. Please, don't let him hurt you. I can't lose you too. The words felt hollow, coming from the woman who had betrayed me in the worst way possible. I wanted to believe her. Part of me still loved her. But I couldn't ignore the truth. She had chosen him. And now, there was no turning back. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said, my voice cold, even though my heart was shattered. But I'll deal with Liam. I'll handle this. And in that moment, I realized that this was bigger than me. It was bigger than Amanda. It was about survival. And I wasn't going to let Liam Harper get away with what he had done. Chapter 5. The Web Tightens. The weight of Amanda's confession lingered with me long after our meeting. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had been thrust into a world I didn't belong to, a world where lies, power, and crime dictated everything. But it wasn't just about my marriage anymore. It was about Liam, and I wasn't going to let him walk away untouched. I spent the next few days doing everything I could to learn more about him. I dug deeper into the criminal connections I had discovered, piecing together the puzzle that was Liam Harper. Every thread I pulled only unraveled more questions, more dangers. He was involved in everything. Drugs, weapons, trafficking, money laundering, it was all part of his empire. An empire built on the suffering of others. And Amanda was just another casualty in his wake. But the more I learned, the more I realized that Liam wasn't just a criminal, he was a predator. He preyed on the vulnerable, the lost, the desperate. And Amanda had been all of those things. She wasn't the first woman he had manipulated, and I doubted she would be the last. The thought of her caught in his web of lies made my stomach turn. I couldn't let him keep her. I couldn't let him have control over any part of my life anymore. But this wasn't about saving her. This was about taking Liam down. I reached out to my contacts in law enforcement, getting information on his associates, his businesses, his ties to the underworld, everything I could use to bring him to justice. But the more I dug, the more I realized that Liam had covered his tracks expertly. He was untouchable, or so he thought. I couldn't go to the police, not yet. I had to be careful. I had to play my cards right, or I could end up dead, just like the others who had crossed him. So I started making my own moves. I called in a favor from an old friend of mine, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Tommy the Ghost Russo. Tommy was an ex-cop turned private investigator with his own connections to the criminal world. He knew how to move in the shadows, how to find the things people didn't want found. I briefed him on Liam Harper and asked him to dig deeper, to find something that could be used against him. Tommy didn't ask questions. He was used to working in the dark. But a few days later, he came back with information that made my blood run cold. There's a shipment coming in. Tommy told me over the phone. It's going down tomorrow night. Big money, guns, drugs, everything. And guess who's at the center of it? Liam. I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. This was it. This was the break I needed. But there was more. Tommy had uncovered a dark secret. Liam wasn't just selling drugs or weapons. He had been involved in a series of disappearance people who had crossed him and vanished without a trace. His reach was farther than I had ever imagined, and I was in too deep to back out now. I had a choice to make. I could take the information to the authorities and risk losing my chance to take Liam down, or I could use it to my advantage and bring him down myself. I decided to go with the latter. I wasn't going to play by the rules anymore. I was going to make Liam Harper pay for everything he had done, not just to me, but to the countless others whose lives he had destroyed. The plan was simple. I would disrupt the shipment, force Liam into a corner, and when he was desperate, when he had nowhere else to turn, I would have him. I wasn't just going to take his empire down. I was going to make sure he understood what it felt like to lose everything. But as I prepared for what would be the most dangerous move I had ever made, I knew one thing for certain. This wouldn't end with just Liam. There would be consequences. There always were. And I wasn't sure if I would make it out alive. Chapter 6. The Night of Reckoning. The night of the shipment came faster than I expected. Everything had been carefully planned. Tommy had given me the exact location of the drop, and I had arranged for a small team to help disrupt the operation. But the deeper I got into this, the more I realized how little control I actually had. I wasn't just walking into a situation that could get me killed, I was walking into a war zone. The drop-off point was an old warehouse near the docks, isolated, tucked away from the prying eyes of the city. It was the perfect location for someone like Liam to conduct his dirty business. I had no illusions about what was going to happen tonight. There was no turning back now. I arrived early, the sound of my boots echoing off the concrete floor as I surveyed the area. The darkness enveloped me, the shadows making it harder to see, but giving me the cover I needed. My heart was racing, but I kept my composure. This wasn't just about revenge anymore, it was about survival. I was waiting for Tommy's signal. I checked my watch again. 10:42 p.m. Still no word. Something didn't feel right. I moved into position, hiding behind stacks of shipping crates. Every sense was on high alert. This wasn't a game. One wrong move, and everything would fall apart. Then I saw them. 2 men heavily armed, standing near the warehouse entrance. The shipment was about to arrive. But instead of the usual small-time players, these were Liam's top enforcers. The kind of men you didn't cross, no matter who you were. I had underestimated Liam. He wasn't just expecting a small-scale exchange, he had prepared for a full-blown ambush. The trap was set, and I had walked right into it. Before I could react, the sound of tires screeching echoed through the night air. The convoy had arrived 3 black SUVs, their headlights cutting through the dark. The vehicles came to a halt in front of the warehouse, and men began unloading the cargo. Guns, drugs, cash, and something more dangerous. I knew this was my moment. Tommy had warned me that things might go sideways, but I wasn't prepared for the chaos that erupted next. The sound of gunfire shattered the silence. A few of the men who had been unloading the cargo dropped to the ground, a spray of blood marking the concrete. I dove behind a stack of crates, heart pounding in my chest. But then, in the chaos, I saw him, Liam Harper, standing with a smug grin on his face, watching the carnage unfold like it was nothing more than a show. His eyes met mine for a split second, and I knew. He knew exactly who I was. He knew why I was there. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. Liam had been expecting this. He had known I was coming. He had orchestrated the entire thing. I barely had time to process the situation before one of Liam's men grabbed me from behind. A sharp pain shot through my side as a knife was pressed to my ribs. I fought back, slamming my elbow into his face, but it was no use. I was outnumbered and outgunned. But then, a voice broke through the chaos. It was Tommy's. He had managed to get inside the warehouse with reinforcements, and now a full-fledged gunfight was raging in every corner of the building. "Jack!" Tommy yelled, trying to make his way toward me. "Get down!" I didn't have to be told twice. I ducked behind a pile of crates, the deafening sound of gunfire filling my ears. But there was no escaping the fact that I had just walked into a trapone that had been set for me from the very beginning. I looked up to find Liam's cold, calculating eyes on me again. He was standing by the back exit, ready to flee, and he was enjoying every second of it. He had known I would come. He had set me up like a pawn on a chessboard. As I watched him retreat into the shadows, something inside me snapped. This wasn't just about vengeance anymore. It was about survival. I wasn't going to let him get away, not this time. I bolted from my cover, my body moving on autopilot, adrenaline pumping through my veins. I wasn't thinking clearly. I was only focused on one thing: stopping Liam. But before I could reach him, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. I looked down to see blood soaking through my shirt. The world started to spin as my knees buckled beneath me. The last thing I saw before I collapsed was Liam's face, his eyes filled with cold indifference. And then, everything went black. Chapter 7: The Edge of Darkness. I don't know how long I was out, but when I woke up, I was in a hospital room. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled my nostrils, and the soft beeping of a heart monitor was the only sound breaking the silence. My chest felt tight, the pain in my side unbearable. I looked down and saw the bandages wrapped around my torso, evidence of the bullet that had nearly ended my life. For a moment, I forgot where I was. I forgot everything. And then the memories hit me like a freight train, Liam. The gunfight, the blood, and the cold realization that I had almost lost everything. My fingers gripped the side of the bed, and I tried to sit up. It hurt, but I forced myself to do it. I had to. I wasn't going to lie down, not while Liam was out there, still breathing, still playing his game. The door to the room opened, and a nurse walked in. She looked at me with wide eyes, like she wasn't sure whether I was supposed to be awake yet. But she quickly regained her composure, offering me a faint smile. "Mr. Porter, you're awake," she said softly. "You've had quite the ordeal. You're lucky to be alive. The bullet just missed your lung." I didn't care about luck. I cared about one thing and one thing only. "Where is he?" I rasped, my voice barely a whisper. The nurse frowned, not understanding. "Who, sir?" "Liam Harper," I growled. "Where is he?" The nurse backed away slightly, clearly startled by my intensity. But I didn't have the energy to care. I was too focused on finding Liam, on ending this once and for all. Before she could respond, a familiar voice interrupted. It was Tommy. "Easy, Jack," he said, stepping into the room with a grim look on his face. "You need to rest. You've been through hell." I didn't want to rest. I didn't want to think about my wounds. I wanted Liam. I wanted to finish what I had started. "Tommy, where is he?" I asked again, this time more forcefully. "Liam, where the hell is he?" Tommy's face hardened, but he didn't say anything at first. He seemed to be weighing his words carefully. "Liam's gone," he finally said. We didn't get him. He slipped away, Jack. He had a backup plan. There's no sign of him anywhere." My heart sank. All that effort, all that risk, and I had come so close. But it wasn't enough. Liam had escaped. Again. "Don't worry," Tommy added, trying to reassure me. "We'll get him. We have the connections. We'll find him." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. All I could think about was how close I had been to finishing this, how close I had been to ending the nightmare that had consumed my life, and now Liam was free. The thought made my blood boil. Tommy didn't leave right away. He stayed with me for a while, updating me on what had happened after the shootout. The cops had shown up, and the whole place had been swarming with authorities, but Liam's men had already cleared out. The shipment was gone, along with most of the people involved. But somehow, Liam had managed to get away unscathed. That was the thing about Liam. He was always one step ahead. But I wasn't going to let this go. I couldn't. Not after everything he had done, after everything he had taken from me. I wasn't going to stop until I had him, until he felt the same fear I had felt when I first realized what he had done to my life. Tommy and I made plans for what came next. I couldn't stay in the hospital much longer. I needed to get back on my feet, to continue the search. I wasn't going to rest until I had Liam Harper in my sights. And this time, I would be the one to make sure he didn't escape. Chapter 8. The Hunt Begins. The pain in my side was still unbearable, but I ignored it. I couldn't afford to be weak right now. I had a job to do. There was a dangerous man out there, someone who had been playing games with my life, and I wasn't going to rest until I had him in my grasp. Tommy was relentless. He was just as determined as I was to bring Liam to justice, but his usual calm demeanor had slipped away. I could see the urgency in his eyes as he briefed me on everything he had uncovered in the past few days. Liam was a ghost. No one had seen him since the warehouse. He had disappeared without a trace, as if he had melted into thin air. It wasn't just that Liam was good at covering his tracks, it was that he knew how to make people disappear. He had a network contacts, resources, and a reputation that made him untouchable. I wasn't going to be able to find him through normal means. This wasn't a case for the police. This was personal. We needed to go off the grid. And that meant digging into the criminal world that Liam inhabited, a world where I was no more than a pawn that was starting to learn the rules of the game. Tommy had a few leads, but they were nothing concrete. He had spent the last few days tracing Liam's known associates, following the money, trying to figure out where he had gone. But so far, nothing. It was like Liam had vanished into the darkness. I spent hours every day going through Liam's connections, his old business partners, and anyone who might have information about where he could be hiding. The more I dug, the more I realized just how deep this went. Liam wasn't just a criminal. He was a part of something much bigger, a web of corruption, power, and violence that spanned the city. He had allies, people who would do anything to protect him. I started meeting with people in the underground world. I couldn't trust anyone completely, but I knew I had to find someone who could point me in the right direction. Some of them were hesitant to talk, but others were more willing, mostly because they knew that I wasn't backing down. I wasn't going to stop until I had Liam in my sights again. One of the people I met was an old acquaintance, Danny the Razor Malone, a low-level enforcer with connections to some of the same circles Liam ran in. Danny wasn't someone I'd trust under normal circumstances, but right now I didn't have the luxury of choosing who I worked with. Liam's not in the city, Danny told me after we exchanged pleasantries, his voice low and cautious. He's out of town. I've been hearing rumors, but it's all hush-hush. I don't know where he's hiding, but I know this. He's laying low for now. He's making moves, setting up something big. And if you're smart, you'll stay out of his way. I didn't want to hear that. I didn't want to back down. But I also knew that Danny wasn't the type to lie about things like this. Liam was out of town. But where and why? I had a feeling it wasn't just about him staying out of sight. Liam was planning something, and I needed to figure out what it was before it was too late. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was running out of time. Tommy and I kept up the search, working in the shadows, trying to make sense of the puzzle pieces. Each lead seemed to go nowhere, but I knew that sooner or later Liam would slip up. He always did. As the days passed, the pressure mounted. I was getting closer, I could feel it. But every time I thought I had a breakthrough, I was left with more questions. What was Liam really up to? What was his endgame? And how far would he go to make sure I never found out? The answers were out there. I just had to find them. And I wasn't going to stop until I had Liam in my hands, no matter what it took. Chapter 9. The Mask Slips. I hadn't seen Amanda in days. After the chaos at the warehouse, I hadn't been in a place where I could talk to her. I was so consumed with the idea of bringing Liam down that I hadn't thought about what her role in all of this was anymore. But as I sat alone in my apartment, late one night, staring at the wall, her face kept popping into my mind. I couldn't just let her go. I couldn't just leave her out of this. The reality was, no matter how many criminal connections I had dug into, no matter how close I was to finding Liam, I still had a life that had been destroyed by all this. And that life was tangled up with Amanda. I couldn't ignore it. It was time for me to face the truth. Tommy had been focused on tracking Liam, but he knew I was still torn. I had tried to cut Amanda out of my life, but I couldn't stop thinking about what she told me, that she was scared. Scared of Liam. Scared of what he had become. But deep down, I knew that she wasn't the only one to blame for everything that had happened. She'd been manipulated. Yes, but so had I. I decided it was time to confront her. I found her at the same apartment where I'd last seen her, a place she had been staying ever since she moved out of our house. The door was slightly ajar when I knocked, as if she knew I was coming. My heart pounded in my chest, the years of bitterness, betrayal, and anger rushing to the surface as I stepped inside. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Jack. Her voice was softer than I expected, full of guilt and regret. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at her, taking in the woman I thought I knew, the woman who had once been everything to me, who had once shared a life with me. But now, that life felt like a lie. Why did you do it? I finally asked, my voice low and filled with pain. Why didn't you tell me about Liam? About everything? Why didn't you warn me? Amanda looked away, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. She opened her mouth to speak but didn't, as if the words were trapped inside her. It took a moment before she spoke. I never wanted any of this, Jack. I swear to you, she said, her voice trembling. Liam, he used me. He promised me things, made me feel like I had no other choice. But I should have never let him get close to you. I should have never let you get caught in all of this. I wanted to yell at her. I wanted to call her every name in the book for what she'd done, for the pain she caused me. But deep down, I knew there was more to the story than what I had seen. So what now, Amanda? I asked, the bitterness slipping into my voice. Now that you've dragged me into this hell, what do you want from me? You want me to save you from him, from your own mistakes? She flinched, the words stinging more than I intended. But I couldn't stop now, not when everything was so messy. I don't know, she said quietly. I don't know what I want anymore. But I can't live like this, Jack. I can't keep running from Liam, and I don't want you to get hurt because of me. I never wanted to drag you back into this nightmare. But I'm scared. I sat down across from her, the weight of the past few days finally starting to sink in. This wasn't just about Liam anymore. It was about everything that had been lost my trust in her, in myself, in the world around me. It was about the slow decay of a life that had once felt real. But here we were, and we couldn't go back. You're not going to get rid of him that easily, I said, my voice harsh but steady. He's not done with you, and he's not done with me. Amanda nodded, a defeated look on her face. I know, but maybe we can stop him together. I didn't respond right away. I didn't know if it was even possible to stop Liam now. He had his claws too deep in everything. The criminal world, my marriage, my life, it wasn't going to be easy. And there was no guarantee that we would make it out of this alive. But as I sat there looking at the woman I had once loved, I knew one thing. I couldn't let him win. Not now, not ever. I'm not doing this for you, Amanda, I said quietly, standing up to leave. But I'm going to end this. I'm going to take him down. She didn't stop me as I walked out the door. I wasn't sure what the future held for me, for her, or for Liam. But one thing was certain. The game was changing. And this time, it wasn't Liam pulling the strings. It was me. Chapter 10. The final move. The clock was ticking. Days had passed since my conversation with Amanda, but the weight of everything still pressed on me like a suffocating blanket. I was trapped in a game I didn't fully understand, but there was no escaping it now. Liam had crossed the line, and now it was my turn to make the next move. Tommy and I had been working in tandem, tracking down every lead, every whisper, every piece of information that could help us corner Liam. But as much as we dug, it felt like he was always one step ahead. He knew we were coming, and he was preparing himself for the inevitable confrontation. The one thing I knew for sure was that he would stop at nothing to protect his empire, and that meant nothing and no one was safe. But I wasn't afraid anymore. I had nothing left to lose. My life, my marriage, my dignity, they were all already gone. The only thing that mattered was ending this once and for all. We had located Liam's hideout, a mansion tucked away in the hills on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't just any mansion. It was a fortress, surrounded by high walls and armed guards at every entrance. Getting in would be nearly impossible, but it didn't matter. I wasn't going to just walk in, I was going to make him come to me. Tommy had arranged for a final risky plan. We were going to draw Liam out, force him into a corner, and leave him with nowhere to run. It was a dangerous move, and it was the only way to catch him. I spent the next few days getting everything ready. Weapons, vehicles, intel. I made sure we were prepared for every eventuality. I knew this wasn't going to be easy, but I had been through too much to back down now. This was it, the final showdown. The night before our plan was set to unfold, Tommy came to see me. He looked more tired than usual, his face drawn and weary from the constant stress. But there was determination in his eyes, and that was all that mattered. You ready for this? Tommy asked, his voice steady but with an edge of concern. I nodded, gripping the steering wheel of the car as we sat in silence for a moment. As ready as I'll ever be. We can't afford to hesitate. This is the end, Tommy. There's no turning back. I know, Tommy said, his voice quiet. But just remember Liam's a cornered animal. He'll do anything to survive. Don't underestimate him. I turned to look at him. I won't. But I can't back down now. This has to end. The plan was simple. We would create a diversion of fake shipment designed to lure Liam out of his hideout. He wouldn't be able to resist the opportunity. We had spent weeks setting up the details, making it believable. Once he was out in the open, we would move in, neutralize his men, and finally capture him. It was a risky move, but I was running out of options. This was our best shot. The night arrived. We positioned ourselves at the edge of the mansion's property, hidden in the shadows, waiting for the first signs that Liam had taken the bait. My pulse raced in my ears, but I kept my focus. Every breath felt like it could be my last, but I had trained myself for this moment. I wasn't going to let fear control me anymore. Then, just as I had hoped, the lights of the mansion flickered in the distance. The convoy had begun to move. Liam had bitten. It was go time. Tommy and I led the charge, moving quickly and quietly as we made our way closer to the mansion. The guards were focused on the fake shipment that we had set up, and in that moment of distraction, we struck. Tommy took out the first guard with a silent shot, and I followed, neutralizing the rest of the men as we moved through the property. But as we approached the main house, something didn't feel right. The tension in the air was too thick. It was as if something was waiting to explode. And then, it hit. The doors of the mansion burst open, and a hail of bullets rained down on us. Liam wasn't just sitting back, waiting for us. He had anticipated this move. The bastard had been expecting us all along. I ducked behind a nearby pillar, my heart racing. The guards that had been on the perimeter had been waiting for us. They had set up an ambush. "Get down!" Tommy shouted, pulling me to safety. The sound of gunfire was deafening. I could feel the pressure of each shot vibrating through the air. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. This was war. But I couldn't back down. Not now. I pulled my weapon, taking out a few of Liam's men in quick succession. I could hear Tommy doing the same, but we were outnumbered. It didn't matter. We had to keep pushing forward. Finally, we made it to the main entrance of the mansion. The door was wide open, and the hallway beyond was lit with a cold, dim light. The stench of death was in the air. I didn't need to be told what was waiting for me inside. Liam was there, and this time I was going to make sure he didn't walk away. Chapter 11. The Endgame. The air inside the mansion felt cold and oppressive as I stepped through the door. My boots echoed on the marble floors, the sound sharp and unnervingly loud. I had spent too many nights thinking about this moment, imagining how it would feel to finally confront Liam face to face. But now that it was happening, everything seemed to slow down. My thoughts raced, and I could feel the weight of every step I took. Tommy was right behind me, keeping low, scanning the hallway with a practiced eye. He knew how to move in situations like this, but this wasn't just any mission. This was personal. Every step we took felt like it was leading me closer to the confrontation I had been dreading and anticipating for so long. Liam's men were dead or incapacitated, but I could feel his presence. He was somewhere ahead, pulling the strings like he always did. The mastermind, the manipulator, the man who had torn my life apart. We reached the grand staircase. The banister gleamed in the dim light, leading up to the second floor where I knew Liam would be waiting. I could hear faint sounds of Movement's voice, perhaps, or the shuffle of his boots on the floor above. He knew we were here, and he was ready. I motioned to Tommy, who nodded silently, his face grim. We ascended the stairs, our weapons at the ready. As we reached the top, the hallway stretched out before us, lined with expensive paintings and antique furniture. It was all just a facade of luxury built on lies and blood. We reached the door at the end of the hallway, the one that led to the study. Liam's domain, the place where it all started. I pushed the door open with a heavy breath. There he was, standing by the window, his back to us, looking out over the city below. He didn't turn when we entered. He didn't need to. He knew exactly who was coming for him. "You think this ends tonight, Jack?" Liam's voice was calm, almost bored, as if he were waiting for a show to begin. "You think this little game of ours can be wrapped up in a nice little bow? You've been chasing me for months. And for what? To end up here, at the mercy of a man who's always been 2 steps ahead?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. I took a step forward, my eyes locked on his back, waiting for him to turn around. When he finally did, he was smiling cold, smug, like he'd already won. "You know," Liam continued, "you and I aren't that different, Jack. You think you're any better than me? We're both just men, after all. Just players in a game that's been going on long before either of us showed up." His words hit harder than I expected. He wasn't wrong, in some ways. We were both products of our choices, the result of decisions that had led us to this moment. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was stopping him, once and for all. "You're not going to get away this time, Liam," I said, my voice steady but full of the rage that had been building in me for months. "This ends tonight. Your empire, your lies, all of it." Liam laughed, a low, mocking sound that sent a chill down my spine. "You think you can stop me? You think you're the hero in this story? You're just a man trying to clean up a mess you helped create." And just like that, the final mask slipped. Liam wasn't invincible. He wasn't some untouchable kingpin. He was just a man who had fooled everyone, including himself. He reached for a gun on the desk, his movement swift, but I was faster. I raised my weapon, and before he could make a move, I fired. The shot rang out in the silent room. Liam staggered backward, his eyes wide in shock. He hadn't expected it to end this way. He had planned for everything except for me to be the one who ended it. He crumpled to the floor, his blood spilling across the polished wood, and I stood there, watching him, watching the life drain from his eyes. For a moment, there was silence. No more games, no more manipulation, no more fear. I had done it. I had taken him down. But even as I stood over his lifeless body, I felt no satisfaction, no sense of victory. There was nothing left to celebrate. Everything that had been lost could never be returned. The damage was done. Tommy stepped forward, his face unreadable. "It's over, Jack. We did it." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I looked down at Liam's body, feeling the weight of what had just happened settle over me. This was the end, but it wasn't a happy ending. It was a broken one. A life destroyed by greed, betrayal, and the toxic web that had entangled us all. I left that mansion that night, the city skyline blinking in the distance. Everything had changed. Liam was gone, but so much had been lost in the process. My marriage, my peace of mind, my sense of who I was. But I had learned something along the way. You can't change the past. You can't undo the things you've done, but you can decide how you move forward. I don't know what the future holds for me. Maybe it's too late to find redemption. Maybe it's too late to fix what's broken. But one thing is for sure, I'm not going to let anyone else make me feel powerless. The story ends here, but the questions don't. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see something in this that resonates with your own life. If you've made it this far, I want you to think about something. Have you ever been pushed to the edge? Had your trust betrayed? Or your life turned upside down by someone you loved? Tell me your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. This story may be over, but I'll be back with more. And who knows, maybe you'll find something in the next one that hits even closer to home. Stay strong, stay vigilant, and remember sometimes, the hardest battles are ones you fight with yourself.